He works in computers. He's never going to be able to give her the kind of life she deserves. That's what my mother said about my husband. She said it the night before our wedding, 3 feet away from where I was standing. She didn't know I could hear her. She also didn't know about the $34 million or the mortgage. She especially didn't know about the mortgage. My name is Eleanor Voss. I am 29 years old. I have been married for 3 months. I am telling this story now because I finally have enough distance from the temperature of that room to describe what happened without my hands shaking. And because I think some of you will recognize the particular kind of loneliness I am going to describe. And I think it matters to say it out loud. This is not a story about money. I want to be clear about that from the beginning. The money is part of the architecture, but it is not the point. The point is a man who paid off the mortgage of a woman who spent 4 years telling people he was not enough and never told her, never needed her to know. The point is that I watched him do that, and I married him, and I was right. I grew up in Franklin, Tennessee, in a 3-bedroom house that my mother, Constance Voss, has owned for 22 years and has referenced approximately 10,000 times as evidence of what she built by herself. My mother is an office manager at a dental practice. She wears Ann Taylor suits. She drives a leased Buick Enclave. She has a circle of church friends to whom she reports the details of other people's lives with the regularity and thoroughness of a municipal record-keeping system. She has never, in my memory, said something unkind in a voice she would describe as unkind. Everything she has ever said that has hurt me has been delivered in a voice of sincere maternal concern, which is the most effective delivery mechanism for cruelty I have ever encountered because it makes you feel afterward like the wound is your own misinterpretation. I met Colin Marsh when I was 21, at a trivia night at a bar in Nashville where we were both, separately, failing to answer any question about professional sports. We talked for 3 hours. He walked me to my car. He texted me the next morning with the answer to a trivia question neither of us had gotten right. He had looked it up when he got home. I thought, I want to know this person better. That feeling has not changed once in 8 years. Colin was 24 when we met. He had been out of university for 2 years and was working in logistics technology, a description that I relayed to my mother accurately, and that she received and immediately filed under a category she called something with computers, which is how she described his profession to every neighbor, church friend, and distant relative for the next 4 years. Not because she did not understand what he did, she did not ask enough questions to understand what he did. She had decided what category he belonged in at the introduction, and the category did not require further research. In 2019, Colin and 2 of his university friends, Aaron Marsh and Yusuf Okafor, co-founded a company called Verada Systems. They built route optimization software for mid-size freight carriers. I knew about it from the beginning. I watched them argue about it on whiteboards in our apartment on Thursday evenings. I watched Colin stay up until 2 in the morning on problems I could not fully follow but could recognize as problems he believed in completely. He was not loud about it. He was not the kind of person who led with what he was building or what it might become. He was the kind of person who showed up every day for the work itself without needing anyone to understand the scale of it. My mother, meanwhile, had met him once. The first dinner happened in the spring of 2020. We had been together a little over a year. I drove us to my mother's house in Franklin, 40 minutes south on I-65, a drive I had made every few weeks my whole adult life, and that I was making this time with the specific low-grade dread of someone who knows 2 things about a situation and understands they are not compatible. Constance made pot roast. The table was set with the good placemats. She had dressed in a way that suggested the evening was a formal assessment rather than a casual meal, which it was. Within 15 minutes, she asked Colin what his father did for a living. Colin said his father, Earl Marsh, was a retired school bus driver. My mother nodded slowly. The kind of nod that is not agreement but is the physical action of filing something. She nodded the way you nod when someone has confirmed what you already believed and you are too polite to say so out loud. For the rest of the dinner, she talked about a man from her church named Bryson, who had just made partner at an accounting firm. She mentioned Bryson's parking spot. She mentioned Bryson's mother, who had apparently sacrificed a great deal to put Bryson through school. She did not mention Colin's company because she had not asked about it. She asked if he had siblings. She asked what part of Tennessee his family was from. She asked, at one point, if he had ever considered going back to school. Colin answered every question with patience and warmth and no visible sign of the exact understanding that I knew he had of what was happening. He ate his pot roast. He complimented the meal twice. In the car home, I apologized. He said, "She just wants good things for you." I get it. I sat with that for a minute. Then I said, "She wants legible things for me. It's a little different." He looked at me sideways. He said, "Yeah, it is." That was the beginning of a conversation we had in its various forms for the next 4 years about what my mother was doing, about what it cost, about how to hold it. Colin was remarkably consistent. He never matched her condescension. He never asked me to choose. He kept showing up to dinners and absorbing her management of him with a steadiness I came to understand was not performance. It was character. It was simply who he was. And while he was doing that, he was also building Verada. By 2021, Verada had reached $1.8 million in annual recurring revenue. I knew this. I helped Colin prep for an investor meeting in February of that year by reading his pitch deck 4 times and asking him questions until I understood it well enough to ask better ones. We moved into a larger apartment in East Nashville. Not a showy move, just more space because we needed it. I mentioned to my mother that we had found a nice place. She asked if Colin was on the lease. I said yes. She said, "Good, that's smart." As if his name on a lease was an achievement requiring acknowledgement. In early 2022, Colin paid off my mother's mortgage. I want to tell this carefully because I do not want to flatten it. I had mentioned once, in a conversation that was not about my mother specifically but had drifted in her direction, that her biggest ongoing source of anxiety was the mortgage payment. It came up because she had called me, stressed, about a payment timing issue with her servicer. I had said, without much weight behind it, that I wished that was something I could do something about. I had not said it as a request or a suggestion. I had said it the way you say things when you are 26, and the problem is larger than your salary. Colin said nothing at the time. 3 weeks later, he told me he had done it. He had arranged a third-party payoff of the remaining balance through a financial intermediary, $91,000. The house was clear. He had not told my mother it was him. He had arranged it anonymously. He asked me if I was okay with that. He said, "If you want her to know it was me, I understand." But I didn't do it for the credit. I sat very still for a long time. I thought about the pot roast dinner. I thought about the Bryson mentions. I thought about the nod when Earl Marsh was identified as a school bus driver. I thought about my mother standing in her kitchen, calling her servicer, anxious over numbers. And I thought about Colin, who had been absorbing her low-level contempt for 2 years by then, quietly making sure she would never have to worry about those numbers again. I said, "She can't know it was you." Not because I wanted to protect her, because I wanted to protect what he had done. I did not want it contaminated by her reaction. I did not want her filing it under a category. I wanted it to remain exactly what it was. Colin said, "I know." My mother told the church it must have been Wendell, a family friend who had come into some money. She mentioned it on 2 separate Sundays. She never investigated further. She has been living in a mortgage-free house for 2 years without knowing that the man she considered unworthy of her daughter's future was the reason. I did not tell her. Not in 2022. Not when Colin proposed in February of 2023 on a Tuesday night in our kitchen, which is exactly where every important thing in our life together has happened. She was quiet for 4 seconds when I called her. I counted. Then she said, "Well, I just hope you know what you're doing." I told her about the ring. She said, "That's sweet." She said it the way you say "bless your heart" in Tennessee, the way that means, "I have assessed this and found it insufficient, but I am choosing to let it pass with minimal vocabulary. I did know what I was doing. I had known for years. In October of 2023, Ferrata Systems was acquired. The final figure was $34 million. Collins' equity share was $8.4 million, paid out at close. The acquisition had been in discussion since spring of that year, quietly, behind NDAs, with the particular controlled tension of a deal that is large enough to change everything but small enough that the wrong piece of information in the wrong direction could collapse it. I had known it was coming for months. I had told no one, not my closest friend, not my coworker, not my mother. The day it closed, Colin and I went to the Thai restaurant we had been going to every Thursday since 2021. We ordered the same things we always ordered. We split a bottle of Riesling. We talked for 2 hours about everything except what had just happened, and then at some point we talked about that too. And then we walked home and sat on our couch, and I put my feet in his lap and we watched television, and I thought, this is the same. He is the same. Nothing about who he is has changed by $1. He had been extraordinary for years. The number was just the part that other people could measure. We set the wedding for June 8th, 2024. We chose West Haven Estate in Franklin. Colin's choice, actually, because he knew I had looked at it once in a magazine and put it down without saying anything, and he had remembered. The guest list was 114 people. Constance was involved in the planning in the way that mothers are involved when they have strong opinions about floral arrangements and weaker opinions about keeping those opinions to scale. The acquisition was covered in 2 trade publications and 1 regional Tennessee business journal. Constance does not read trade publications. She reads Facebook and the church newsletter. She was as entirely unaware of Ferrata Systems in June of 2024 as she had been the first evening she heard Colin's voice in her kitchen. She had filed him in a category in 2020, and the category required no updates. The night before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner at a restaurant Colin had reserved and paid for, I was standing near the edge of the room, talking to no one in particular, when I heard my mother's voice 3 feet behind me. She was talking to my Aunt Vera. She said, "I just don't understand what she sees in him. He works in computers. He's never going to be able to give her the kind of life she deserves." I stood very still. I picked up my glass of water. I walked to the other end of the room. I want to describe what I felt in that moment because it was not what you might expect. It was not hot. It was not the sharp spike of anger that you get from a sudden insult. It was something much quieter and colder. The feeling of hearing something you already knew, confirmed in a language you had hoped your mother would outgrow. The feeling of knowing you were right to have kept the secret. The feeling of knowing, with complete certainty, that the room she would sit in tomorrow was going to do something she did not have the vocabulary to prepare for. I had been waiting for the right moment for 2 years. Standing 3 feet away from my mother in that rehearsal dinner was not it. The wedding morning was a sequence of the specific joys that belong to that kind of day. The light through the venue windows, the sound of my bridesmaids laughing too loudly in the preparation room, the particular clarity of a morning when you know exactly what is about to happen and want it to. I did not think about the previous evening. I thought about Colin, who had texted me at 7:15 that morning with a single sentence. "Today is my favorite day so far." I walked down the aisle toward a man who had driven 40 minutes to meet my mother, answered every question she asked, said nothing when she nodded slowly, paid off her house, and kept building. He was wearing a dark navy suit. He looked like himself. He looked like the only person in the room I needed to find. The ceremony was everything it was supposed to be. The reception began at 6. The room was full and warm and exactly the way those rooms are supposed to be, the kind of evening that has a quality of completion to it, like a sentence ending on the right word. Constance was at table 2. Colin's parents, Earl and Renata Marsh, were at table 4. Earl in a suit he had bought for the occasion. He had the bearing of a man who knows what he raised and has been quietly waiting for the world to catch up. The toasts began about an hour in. Colin's college friend Theo went first. Short, warm, specific. The kind of toast that makes a room laugh in a way that feels earned. Then Aaron stood. I want to say something about Aaron Marsh before I describe what happened. Aaron is Colin's co-founder, his closest friend, and the person who has known him the longest and the most precisely. He is not a performative person. He is not given to speeches. He had a no-tech card in his hand that he looked at once and then set on the table. What he said because he meant it, and because it was the truest thing he knew how to say about his best friend on the day his best friend got married. He began with how they met, second year of university, a shared apartment, a whiteboard covered in diagrams for a software problem that everyone else told them was not interesting enough to solve. He talked about what it was like to build something with someone for years and watch the person stay exactly the same size regardless of what the thing became. Denny said, most people who know Colin personally, and I mean really know him, not just know what he does, already understand that he is the least impressive-seeming impressive person you will ever meet. He does not need you to know what he's built. He just keeps building. He paused. He picked up his champagne glass. But since this is a wedding and full disclosure feels appropriate, Colin and I and our partner Yusuf sold our company last October. Verada Systems. $34 million. He let the number sit. The room produced a sound I have been trying to describe accurately for 3 months. It was not a gasp. It was not a cheer. It was something between the two, the sound of 114 people recalibrating simultaneously, like a room full of instruments adjusting to a new key. It lasted about 2 seconds. Aaron continued, Colin's cut was 8.4. He used some of it to pay off a mortgage he's never going to tell you about, for a person who probably doesn't deserve it, because that is the kind of man he is. He raised his glass to Colin, the most quietly extraordinary person I know, and to Eleanor, who knew it before any of us were paying attention. I was looking at Colin when Aaron said 34 million. I watched Colin's face arrange itself into the expression of a man who loves his best friend deeply and is going to have a very specific conversation with him later. He was not upset. He looked like a person who is, despite his best efforts to remain invisible, loved by the right people. I reached across the sweetheart table and put my hand over his. I did not look at table 2. I want to tell you what was happening at table 2 because Aunt Vera told me in detail the following morning. When Aaron said 34 million, Constance did not move. Her champagne glass was on the table. Her hand was beside it, not holding it. Vera, seated to her left, turned to look at her. Constance did not look back. The women from her church circle at table 3, Sylvia from choir, 2 others whose names I will not use, looked at each other. Sylvia put her hand over her mouth. Vera told me she looked at her watch. Just briefly. The way you look at a watch when you are calculating something. At table 4, Earl Marsh raised his glass quietly alone and took a sip. He did not make a face about it. He did not look around to see who had noticed. He just raised his glass and drank and set it down again. He has known who his son is for 31 years. The number was not news to him. The number was just the unit of measurement everyone else had been waiting for. I did not look at my mother during the toast. I did not look at her when the room went quiet. I did not allow myself the satisfaction of watching her face, because I had decided, sometime in the previous 4 years, that watching her face was not what I was there for. I was there for Colin. I kept my eyes on Colin. I kept my hand over his. That was the only thing that mattered to me in that room. Later, near the end of the evening, Constance found me near the bar. She touched my arm. I turned. Her face had an expression I had not seen on it before. Not distress exactly, not guilt exactly, but the expression of a woman who has walked into a room and realized that the furniture is arranged differently than she remembered it and has not yet decided how to navigate the new layout. She said quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at her for a moment, not with anger. I was past anger. I was somewhere on the other side of it, somewhere that is harder to name but feels more permanent. I said, "Would it have changed anything, Mom?" She did not answer. I did not wait for one. I touched her hand once, briefly, and then I went back to my husband who was dancing with his father. I want to stop here and say something about what the mortgage means. I have been talking around it since the beginning of this story, and now I want to say it plainly. Colin paid $91,000 to clear the mortgage on the home of a woman who had spent 2 years making clear, in the specific vocabulary of her concern, that he was insufficient. She had asked about his father's profession and filed it. She had mentioned Bryson's parking spot at the dinner table. She had been quiet for 4 seconds when I told her we were engaged. She had said, "That's sweet," about a ring he had saved for and chosen carefully. She had stood 3 feet away from her daughter the night before her daughter's wedding and told a room that he would never be able to give me the life I deserved. And he had already, before any of that, before the rehearsal dinner comment, before the 4-second silence, before the ring was sized, taken the heaviest thing off her shoulders. Because I had mentioned once that the mortgage made her anxious, he did it for me. He did it for love of me. And because the weight on someone I loved was a weight he could lift, so he lifted it. He did not do it to win her over. He did not do it to prove anything. He did it knowing she would never know it was him. He did it knowing she might stand at a rehearsal dinner the following year and call him insufficient to her sister-in-law. He did it anyway. That is the moment, sitting on our couch in 2022 while he told me quietly what he had done, that I understood precisely who I had said yes to, not because of the money. The money was not the point. The point was the shape of the action. The point was that it was done in secret for the right reasons and then set down. He never picked it up again. He never used it. He just kept being exactly who he was. He paid off the mortgage of a woman who thought he wasn't good enough for me. He never told her. He never needed her to know. That was the moment I understood exactly who I had said yes to. In the weeks after the wedding, Constance called twice. She did not apologize directly. She is not built for direct apology. She is built for circumnavigation, for approaching the things she wants to say and then veering at the last moment into something adjacent and softer. She said, "I just didn't know." She said, "I was only worried about you." She said these things in the voice of a woman who genuinely believes them, which is part of what makes it so difficult. I listened. I did not argue. I did not read her the accounting of what she had done and what it had cost. At some point I said, "I know, Mom. I know you were worried." And I meant it in the specific and limited way in which it was true. She was worried about me. She has always been worried about me. Her worry is real. Her worry is also the thing she uses to justify every verdict she issues without enough information. Every category she creates before she has read far enough to understand what she is filing. Her concern for me and her contempt for him are not in conflict in her mind. They are, to her, the same thing. That is what I cannot fix. I have stopped trying to fix it. Our relationship has not broken. It has bent into a new shape, one that has more distance in it, more careful management of what I share and what I hold back, more of the specific labor that relationships require when the trust has been reorganized rather than restored. We speak. We will continue to speak. I am not interested in punishment. I am interested in accuracy, in knowing what this relationship is and what it can hold and what it cannot, and building around that rather than against it. Colin sent my mother a fruit basket from our honeymoon. He signed the card Colin. Just Colin. She called me to say it was thoughtful. She did not post it on Facebook. She put it on her kitchen counter and left it there. I think about that sometimes. The fruit basket on the counter, unsigned in any way that makes the story convenient for her. Just Colin, the man who works in computers, the man who is never going to be able to give her daughter the life she deserves, the man who paid off her house and then sent her mangoes from Kauai and signed his name without annotation, without score settling, without a single word that would require her to say something she's not capable of saying yet. He is the same as he has always been. The number changed what other people knew. It did not change him. I have been thinking about what my mother actually believed, when she believed it. I do not think she was performing concern she did not feel. I think she looked at Colin, his unassuming manner, his father's profession, his failure to announce himself, his preference for whiteboards over business cards, and she saw a category she recognized, and she stayed in that category, and she stopped looking. Not out of malice. Out of a kind of laziness of imagination that is, in the end, more damaging than malice, because it is impervious to evidence. Malice can be confronted. Imagination that has stopped moving cannot. You cannot argue someone into curiosity they have decided not to have. What I want to say to you, if you are watching this and you recognize something in it, if you have ever had someone in your life who loved you in the way that requires you to perform their blindness for them, who offered you concern as currency but never revised what they believed, is this, you are not responsible for the category they put you in. You are not responsible for updating it. You are allowed to let them sit inside their certainty and build anyway. You are allowed to marry the person you know, rather than the person they can see. You are allowed to keep the secret, because sometimes the secret is yours to keep, and the knowing is enough, and the room will eventually arrange its own evidence. My mother stood up at my wedding reception, uninvited, and took a microphone to tell a room full of people that she hoped my husband would grow into the responsibility of loving me. She did not know. She did not know about the company, about the acquisition, about the $8.4 million that was already in the account by then. She especially did not know that she had been sleeping for 2 years in a house that he had already freed. He didn't ask her to notice. He had never asked her to notice anything. That is who he is. That is who he was when he made $17,000 a year and drove a car with a dent in the rear bumper and argued about software on a whiteboard at 2 in the morning. The number did not make him that person. He already was. My mother stood in a room full of people and told them he wasn't enough. And he had already, quietly, taken the heaviest thing off her shoulders. He never asked her to notice. That is the difference between the person she raised me to look for and the person I actually found. I want to ask you something before you go, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Has someone ever done something quietly generous for a person who didn't deserve it, just because they loved you? Did that person ever find out? Leave it in the comments. I read them. And if this story reached you, if you found something in it that felt familiar, please subscribe. We tell these stories every week because they deserve to be told. And your being here is what makes it possible.